What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live, aka the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. I know it's been a while. Some of y'all may be asking, do you even talk college football anymore, JT? Yes, we do. I know it's been a little break since we were on here talking some college ball. I had to take a little bit of a hiatus from college football since there is no such thing as a off season when it comes to college football, but there is something called a dead period. And normally when you begin to start a spring camp or the start of March in general, there just isn't a lot of interest in college football from March until the end of May. Then around June, July, it kind of picks up. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, I was struggling to come up with things to talk about. So I figured, why not take a little bit of a break from college football and come back when I actually have some things to talk about. And I got to rank the 10 best head coaches in college football entering the 2026 season. I also have figured out how Alabama has fixed their biggest problem. Who's the one team that's going to be able to stop Miami from winning the national championship? If you guys haven't seen any clips of Darian Mensah, Miami's new quarterback in spring camp, this dude is built like the Incredible Hulk now. There's only one team that can stop Miami. There's a Heisman Trophy winner that is forgotten. Nobody talks about how good his Heisman campaign was. He won it just 6 years ago, but it seems as if it happened 20 decades ago, the way that it just never seems to be brought up at all. Ohio State has a new offensive coordinator, and it happens to be the worst one that God ever created. If you are a fan of the Buckeyes, you better pray to the heavens above that this guy isn't the one in charge of calling plays on offense. And they always say that speed kills, but for Tennessee, the speed that their offense has killed any chance that they have of winning a national championship in the foreseeable future under Josh Heupel. Look, if you live, eat, breathe, and die football, you come to the right place. We're talking all things football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. College football, NFL. If you're a diehard football fan, smash that like button, turn on post notifications, subscribe so you do not miss when we drop new content. Also, we are not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones in audio format on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify. If you enjoy the content, you want to support the grind, all we ask is that you take less than 10 seconds out of your busy life and give JT Sports a 5-star review. The links are down in the description down below. Follow us on all social media platforms, Instagram, X, TikTok. You can find us there. You can connect with us at JT Sports _. And without further ado, let's dive into it. So with this being the off season, I figured this was the perfect time to rank the 10 best coaches in college football entering the 2026 season. Now, my criteria for these rankings is based off the last 3 years. So I'm only ranking these coaches based on what they've done these past 3 years. Starting off the list, the 10th best coach in college football is Kyle Whittingham. He's third all time and wins among active head coaches. He recently just got his first 10-win season in like 3-4 years after a very uncharacteristic few down years at Utah. And it was very shocking to see him retire essentially or be forced out of Utah just to end up getting a better job at Michigan. Utah made a huge mistake pushing Kyle Whittingham away. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. You have a young, unproven coach that you had penciled in as Kyle Whittingham's replacement for a while, but Kyle Whittingham still looks like he's at the top of his game. Age is nothing but a number when it comes to Kyle Whittingham. I have to see it to believe it that Kyle Whittingham has regressed and he no longer is what he used to be in his heyday. At the moment, he's the 10th best head coach in college football. At number 9, Steve Sarkisian is the 9th best head coach in college football entering this year. Steve Sarkisian has rebuilt Texas. He revitalized the program. But for the amount he's had to spend in NIL, how well he's been able to recruit, utilize the transfer portal, at a school like Texas, when you have unlimited resources, you can't go 3 years without not only winning your conference championship, but getting to a national championship and also being 0-3 against Georgia when you out-talent them and you out-roster them. There's not a coach that has done less with more than what Steve Sarkisian has these last few years at Texas. Sure, he went to the Final Four of the CFP back-to-back years in a row. That's what the expectation should be. You don't get no brownie points for doing that. When you have unlimited resources, yeah, you're supposed to get to a Final Four. You're supposed to have already won a national championship by now, at least have appeared in one. Notre Dame and Miami have come closer to winning a national championship than what Steve Sarkisian has at Texas with an infinite amount of resources. If Steve Sarkisian doesn't get it done this year, Texas has to go in a different direction. We're giving you everything. You have a $15 to $20 million talent differential against the majority of teams that you go up against. But I do have him at 9 because you can't just overlook and gloss over the fact that he brought back Texas football. There's a reason why I'm coming at Steve Sarkisian the way that I am, based off what he's done to get this program back in the national spotlight. You just expect a lot more success on the field than what you've seen these past 2 years. Lane Kiffin is the 8th best coach in college football entering the 2026 season. He is the SEC's equivalent to Curt Cignetti. Before Curt Cignetti got to Indiana, they were irrelevant. They were just viewed as a basketball school. Before Lane Kiffin got to Ole Miss, the only thing you knew Ole Miss for was them upsetting Alabama a few years ago and then them having Eli Manning. That's the only 2 things that you knew about Ole Miss football until Lane Kiffin put them on the map. Sure, he didn't coach in the playoff game. He still gets credit for taking average SEC program and turning them into a consistent college football playoff contender. If Lane Kiffin would have coached during Ole Miss playoff run this past season, maybe they would have made it to the national championship. Maybe they would have won the doggone thing. Lane Kiffin has also done a phenomenal job at recruiting, one of the best recruiters in America. You don't tell Lane Kiffin no. If you tell Lane Kiffin no, you pretty much are just telling Lane Kiffin, you got to give me a better deal. You got to give me an offer that I can't refuse. I'm expecting for Lane Kiffin to win multiple national titles at LSU. If you were doing more with less at Ole Miss, then you should be able to do a lot more with the amount of resources that LSU has pledged to give Lane Kiffin throughout his tenure serving out this contract. Dan Lanning is my 7th best head coach in college football entering this year. The issue with Dan Lanning is he just hasn't had the postseason success yet. He is only 39, 40 years old, so he's fairly young as head coaches go. But his last few outings in the postseason have been less to be desired. You got routed by Indiana after only losing to them by 10 points during the regular season at home. You got destroyed and dismantled by Ohio State despite beating them during that regular season 2 years ago. And then you also won the Big Ten championship your first season in the conference. Dan Lanning has had a lot of success in the regular season, but in the playoffs, when it's time to deliver, Oregon, they just unravel in the biggest moments against the best teams. And it's just so shocking because most of the teams that they've lost to in the postseason, they either had close losses to during the regular season or they beat in the regular season. So you play Dan Lanning twice, you got the edge on him. If he has to play against the same team that he either lost to once or beat once earlier during the season, his team isn't going to be ready to play. But outside of the postseason struggles, he's a great coach everywhere else, makes very good adjustments, normally has a very good staff. And the floor with Dan Lanning at Oregon is 10 wins. That's one of the highest floors out of any other head coach in college football, not named Ryan Day, who's a lot higher on this list. Mario Cristobal, or I should say Mario Cristobal, is the 6th best head coach in college football. I'm going to be honest about y'all. I was a huge Mario Cristobal hater. I was not a believer in him his first few years at Miami. These last 2 years, though, he won me over. Sure, the team could have did a lot more than what they did with Cam Ward, but he made up for that this past season, getting Miami to their first national championship in decades. Nobody ever thought that we would get Miami football being back in the national championship game before we would get GTA 6. But hey, here we are. That's just the year 2026. And there's a very strong chance that Miami gets back to the national championship this year, since Mario Cristobal is the best recruiter in the nation. He's recruiting 24/7. This dude, you know how we over here on JT Sports live, eat, breathe, and die football? Mario Cristobal lives, eats, breathes, and dies recruiting. That's why he's so damn good at it. And when you're in a hotbed for talent like South Florida, it makes it even more easier to continue to be a national championship contender, since you don't even have to leave your backyard. You can just recruit the South Florida, the Dade County area, and have a team good enough to win a national championship just based off what's in your area code. The only reason why I don't have Mario Cristobal a lot higher is he's not that great of a game day coach. His adjustments normally aren't that good. Even though this past season he improved in those areas, there's still a lot more improvement that he can make. And by this time next year, you could see Mario Cristobal being in the top 5, maybe a lot higher on my list. I have Marcus Freeman as the 5th best head coach in college football right now. He took a program that was already elite, borderline elite, and add a little bit more oil, cooking grease to it. And now you have Notre Dame being talked about in discussions that they haven't been in a very long time, which is possibly being good enough to win a national championship. Normally, when you used to bring up the idea of Notre Dame being able to win it all, you would get clowned, you would get laughed at, since Notre Dame is one of those regular season Super Bowl teams. They always play well in the regular season, but in the playoffs, when they're going up against top tier competition, the big boys like Georgia, Alabama, they oftentimes came up short. The excuse was they just didn't have the resources. They didn't have the talent good enough to compete with those teams under Brian Kelly. Marcus Freeman said, "Hold my beer, Brian Kelly. What you couldn't do at Notre Dame, I'm about to do at Notre Dame." And that's exactly what he's done. The recruiting by Marcus Freeman has been out of this world. If you haven't paid attention to the recruits Notre Dame has brought in, they're bringing in a bunch of sons of NFL players. Like, they got Larry Fitzgerald. Who else? It was somebody else. Jerome Bettis. His son is playing for Notre Dame. So they got a lot of Nepo babies on that team. And they also got a lot of other good recruits that they've brought in over these past few years under Marcus Freeman. Eventually, he's going to win a national championship. If I had to bet money on a head coach who doesn't have a ring right now to get his first one, I'll have to go with Marcus Freeman. I just think what he's done so far at Notre Dame, being so young, this being his first ever head coaching opportunity, he's bound to get a national championship within these next 3 years. And he's also one of the best in-game coaches in college football, in my opinion. Makes very good adjustments. Also makes very good adjustments during the season. This past year, Notre Dame's defense kind of struggled the first half of the year. He made a few tweaks to the secondary, and that defense played a lot better to end the season than what it did coming in to start this year. Marcus Freeman is my 5th best coach in college football. Kellen DeBoer is the 4th best coach in America right now. Sure, Alabama fell off during the second half of last season. They still made it to the SEC championship game. They still won a playoff game. They lost to the defending national champions in round 2. And over the past 3 years that Kellen DeBoer has been a coach, he's been to a national championship, a SEC championship, and he also has had success in the playoffs. He also is undefeated against Dan Lanning and Steve Sarkisian, 2 other fellow top 10 head coaches on this list that have been unable to beat Kellen DeBoer. Kellen DeBoer, sure, the expectations at Alabama are a lot higher than what he's been able to deliver, but he did improve. Year 1, only got 9 wins. Year 2, 11 wins, SEC championship appearance, won a playoff game. I believe Kellen DeBoer has done a pretty good job at Alabama so far. And based on what he's done these past 3 years, he's the 4th best coach in college football at the moment, in my eyes. Ryan Day is the 3rd best head coach in college football right now. He is the standard, the gold standard for what consistency looks like as a head coach at an elite blue blood program. He always has Ohio State a puncher's chance away from winning the national championship. His floor is 10 wins. That's the highest floor out of any head coach in America, not named Dan Lanning. Even if everything was to go wrong for Ohio State, their definition of a bad season is a lot of teams' best seasons in probably 2-3 decades. He also is a great recruiter. I feel he's done a better job recruiting at Ohio State than what even Urban Meyer did. He has a really good feel for the quarterback position. He's made some really good coordinator hires, even though his latest coordinator hires, at least the one he's made at OC, I'm a little bit on the fence about. But you give Ryan Day the benefit of a doubt because he has earned the benefit of a doubt. One of the most winningest coaches in college football over the past 5 years. One of the most successful as well. Let's not forget, he won a national championship 2 years ago when it was believed that he would never be good enough to win Ohio State a national championship. Ryan Day is a top 3 coach in the sport at the moment. Kirby Smart is the 2nd best coach in college football right now. At one point, he was the unquestioned, undisputed best head coach in the sport, but these past few years, he's been outcoached in the playoffs. He got outcoached by Marcus Freeman a few years ago. He got outcoached by Pete Golding this past season. So Kirby Smart, for as dominant as what Georgia has been in the regular season, they've won the last few SEC titles. They consistently win 10-plus games or more. But in the playoffs, the postseason just hasn't been that kind to Kirby Smart. So that's why I got him at number 2, since this is based off the last 3 years. And the last 3 years, Georgia has been close to winning a national championship. But that's the thing, they've just been close. But I think this year, though, they could definitely get back to the big dance. And unfortunately, Kirby Smart no longer holds the title as the best coach in America. The best coach in college football is Curt Cignetti. Curt Cignetti completed the greatest turnaround in the history of sports. What he just did at Indiana is the equivalent to taking over the Cleveland Browns and winning a Super Bowl with them in only 2 years. Indiana was a basketball school before Curt Cignetti took this job. When it came to football, they were just an afterthought. Indiana used to be one of those schools in football that you saw them on your schedule and you viewed them as a stats game, because you knew when you played Indiana, you were going to have the opportunity to put up a lot of stats. You wanted to schedule them for your homecoming game since you had a very high chance being able to beat them, since they normally were not good. They're one of the losingest programs in the history of FBS. And Curt Cignetti in only 2 years turned them into a national champion. And he now has changed the expectations for all coaches in college football. No matter what school you're at, what conference you're in, if Curt Cignetti can win a natty at Indiana, then you can win a national championship at Maryland, Mike Locksley. You can win a national championship at Nebraska, Matt Rule. You can win a national championship at Florida, John Sumrall. And it doesn't take 5 years for you to do it if Curt Cignetti only did it in 2. These are my 10 best head coaches in college football right now. Give your thoughts on these rankings. Which ones do you agree with? Who's too high? Who's too low? I'm very interested to see you guys' responses to this ranking, to this list. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to Kazir Gordon. He says, yo. Shout out to Dixon Myers. He says, bro, is this pre-recorded? No, it's not. We are live. But there is a slight delay between the chat and the live stream. So when I see your comments, it's probably like 10 seconds after you posted it. But we are live. We go live every day, Monday through Thursday. We will be live tomorrow, 9:25 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure that you have it jotted down in your notes. So you're there. You beat us there. You're the first one here. You don't have to wait on us. Check us out on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones on all podcasting platforms. The links are down in the description down below. Give us a 5-star review if you want to support the grind, you enjoy the content. All we ask is that you take 10 seconds out of your busy life and give us a 5-star review. Apple or Spotify, we will greatly appreciate it. Miami has reloaded for another national championship run. As we already know, they came really close to beating Indiana for the natty. Unfortunately, Carson Beck threw a book to end the game, and Miami's hopes of being able to truly say that they're back, even though I already feel Miami's back. But to a lot of people, you can't say the U is back until they win a national championship again. And I want to be shocked if we saw Miami win the national championship this year after just making it to the national championship this past season, since they got an easy schedule. They're playing in the weakest conference in all of college football. The ACC has no competition for Miami this year. The best team that Miami plays in the ACC in their conference is Clemson. And Clemson, although I think they'll be pretty solid this year, they're nowhere as good as what they used to be, and they don't have nowhere near the level of talent as what Miami is going to have this season, especially with the improvement that Miami made at quarterback, losing Carson Beck, bringing in Darian Mensah. You stole it from Duke. If you saw the clip of Darian Mensah warming up for the start of spring camp for Miami, you might have overlooked this, but the dude is built like a linebacker now. He's built like prime Brian Urlacher, prime Ray Lewis at quarterback. I kind of was a little bit taken back. I was saying to myself, Mario Cristobal isn't just developing great football players at Miami. He's developing monsters, because that's what the hell he's just turned Darian Mensah into. When Darian Mensah was at Duke, this guy was built like a toothpick. He spends 2-3 months at Miami, and this dude's built like he's finna go fight a war across the country. Darian Mensah makes Miami the favorite to win it all this year, since he's the best quarterback in college football. This dude won the ACC championship at Duke, a basketball school. And if you're balling out at Duke, you're going to ball out at a program that's going to give you a better offensive line, better coaching, and the best receiver in college football, that being Malachi Tony. Some of y'all may disagree with that. Some of y'all may say Jeremiah Smith. Look, we only give credit to the people that stay loyal. Jeremiah Smith is a dog, but you ain't the number one receiver in college football, my brother. If you would have stayed home and you would have picked to play for the U, you'll be the number one receiver in my eyes. That's Malachi Tony. You got to reward loyalty. Never forget loyalty. NFL. And you think about what Malachi Tony did last year as an 18-year-old fresh out of high school with Carson Beck as his quarterback. You could see Malachi Tony possibly put up Heisman-worthy numbers this year with the improvement that he's going to have at quarterback in Darian Mensah. And every game that Miami plays on their schedule this year, they're a double-digit favorite in all but one. That's Notre Dame, which they currently at the moment are a 5.5-point underdog. Miami this year, with how easy their ACC schedule is, how weak the ACC is, they should easily win their first ACC championship. I don't know how it's taken this long for Miami to win their first one. They've been in this conference for going on, 2-3 decades? But you know what they say? No better time than now. With what Miami has and Darian Mensah at quarterback, Malachi Tony, you bring back Mark Fletcher at running back. This is one of the best offenses in college football. Their offensive line is no question mark. Sure, they lose a few guys to the league, but Mario Cristobal is one of the best recruiters in college football. You also have one of the best offensive line coaches in college football. So you don't have to worry about who Miami's going to have stepping up, who are going to be the new guys, the new faces, replacing familiar names. That doesn't matter when you recruit like how Mario Cristobal does. You live, eat, breathe, and die recruiting. You don't have to worry about rebuilding. You just simply reload. It's the next man up. You see how Darian Mensah is built, right? Imagine going to a Miami spring practice and seeing all these guys move in person. You could be looking at prime Alabama of what Miami is right now. Miami right now is what those old school prime Alabama teams used to be under Nick Saban. When those guys were coming out the tunnel, they already won the game before the game kicked off because they had the psychological advantage over you. You knew that you didn't have nobody that was 6'7", 350 pounds, running 4'9", 4'8", the kind of beast that Mario Cristobal is recruiting and developing at Miami is second to none. Nobody else has the kind of monsters that Miami has on their team. On the line of scrimmage, on the perimeter, Miami essentially has a team full of superhumans on it. Because that's what Darian Mensah has turned into. You've seen the transformation that Darian Mensah has had ever since he transferred from Duke to Miami. He doesn't even look recognizable anymore. When I first saw Darian Mensah slinging that thing at spring camp in a few clips I've seen come across my timeline on X, I was saying, who the hell is this? Because this ain't Darian Mensah. This dude was built like a straw when he first touched down in South Florida. Now all of a sudden, he's built like Sonny Styles. Not only has Miami's offense reloaded at quarterback and on the offensive line, but Miami has also reloaded on defense. The biggest question about Miami is who's going to replace guys like Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor on the defensive line. Well, you reloaded in the transfer portal. You got a very explosive pass rusher out of Missouri who has a lot of the physical characteristics that you look for in a Miami Mario Cristobal defensive lineman. Big, fast, strong, and super explosive for his size. Not only does Miami have elite talent on the defensive line that they've got out of the portal from high school recruiting over these last few years, but they have one of the best coaching staffs in America. When you have an elite coordinator duo like what Miami has, then you don't really have to worry about the new faces that you're going to be throwing out there on the field this year, since good coaches are able to get the most out of anybody that they have to work with on the field. Shannon Dawson has been one of the better OCs for the past few years he's been at Miami. We already saw how great Corey Heatherman's defense was in only his first season at Miami last year. Imagine the big step that this defense could take this year and year two, now that you have a few players coming back that have a lot more memorization, a lot more familiarity with Corey Heatherman's system. And Corey Heatherman, with just how aggressive his defense is, with the scheme that he runs, he automatically elevates and boosts the performance of every single player on the defensive line. And that secondary is going to be really good as well. The only team that can stop Miami from winning the national championship this year is Texas, since Texas, like Miami, has unlimited resources. They have a huge bankroll. They recruit as well as what Miami does. Even though Steve Sarkisian isn't the recruiter that Mario Cristobal is, guys are committing to play for Mario Cristobal because They love his attitude. They love his tenacity. Steve Sarkisian, on the other hand, he can just throw a bunch of money at guys until they say, all right, I'm coming to Texas to play football. You have two elite coaching staffs. We talk about how good Miami's coaching staff is. Texas coaching staff is up there too. They just hired Will Muschamp to be their new defensive coordinator. Texas and Miami are also going to have the two best quarterbacks in college football this year, Darian Mensah and Arch Manning. It's only right that we get Texas versus Miami for the national championship this year. You have two historic blue blood programs that have gone a very long time without tasting a national championship. These are the two best teams in college football this year. These are the two teams to beat, since there aren't too many other teams that can compare to Texas and Miami from a talent standpoint, from a depth standpoint, that have the level of quarterback play that these two teams are going to be getting, and essentially pretty much have no flaws, if any at all. So Miami versus Texas is my early national championship prediction for this upcoming season. And Texas is the only team that I think has a fair shot at stopping Miami this year. Don't be surprised if you see Miami finish 17-0 this year. That's how good this team is going to be this season. Alabama last year, despite how well... that just rolled off the tongue very, very wrong. Alabama's biggest problem last year is why their season fell apart during the second half of 2025. They had no run game at all. They were one of the worst teams in all of college football being able to run the football. They were 129th in rushing yards per game, and they were even worse in yards per carry, only getting 3.1 yards per tote. And obviously, if Kalen DeBoer is going to be able to live up to the high expectations that Nick Saban has set for him, you got to get a lot more out of the ground game than what you have your first two seasons in Tuscaloosa. And Kalen DeBoer has gone all out this offseason at doing everything possible to fix Alabama's biggest problem, their inefficiency running the football. The first thing Kalen DeBoer did to address Alabama's struggles in the ground game was hire a new offensive line coach. He hires offensive line coach Adrian Clem, who's really well respected among the college ranks. Trent Richardson on his podcast said that Adrian Clem creates yard dogs on the offensive line. He's an old school coach that has that old school mentality. I'm not finna be buddy with you. I'm not gonna call you. I'm gonna coach you hard. I'm gonna curse you out because I want to turn you into a dog. And that's what Alabama has been lacking on the line of scrimmage these past couple of years. Past the offensive line, the defensive line too for Alabama has been a little bit soft. And Alabama, when they were at their peak under Nick Saban, their offensive line normally had multiple 3-4 guys that were going high in the drive, guys that were just bigger, faster, and just looked like the peak of humanity. Alabama, they don't have guys like that anymore. They don't have guys that have nastiness about them on the offensive line. They don't have guys that have a mean streak about them. That's what you need in order to have an elite offensive line. And I don't think it's a Kellen DeBoer doesn't understand what an elite offensive line looks like kind of thing, because some of y'all forget, Kellen DeBoer's final season at Washington, that offensive line won the Joe Moore Award. They were the best offensive line in college football that year. Kellen DeBoer knows what an elite offensive line looks like. It's just he hasn't been able to put one together since this is really going to be the first year where this truly is going to be Kellen DeBoer's team, since this is year 3. All of the Nick Saban guys have pretty much either transferred out elsewhere or they're in the NFL now. Now you got guys that are fully bought into Kellen DeBoer's Alabama, guys that fit the scheme that Kellen DeBoer wants to run. And a problem with Alabama's ground game last year is that the running backs that you had were more so north-south runners. They weren't really guys that fit the outside zone scheme that Kellen DeBoer likes to run. So now with you having a new offensive line coach, with the offensive line improving, you should see the running backs on this team look a lot better than what they did last year, because Alabama isn't hurting for running back talent. They have one of the more talented running back rooms in the SEC, but you're only as good as the guys blocking in front of you. And with new offensive line coach Adrian Clem, who has 17 years of experience coaching both college and pro, when he was coaching at Oregon back in 2022, he had 3 guys off that offensive line that got drafted in the NFL. 2 of them were All-Americans. So if you can bring that same level of player development and you can bring that attitude to where you got these Alabama offensive linemen playing nasty with mean streaks again, that's going to open things up for the running backs that Alabama has in a very crowded running back room. You're bringing in true freshman 5-star E.J. Correll, who already is built to play right away. He's 5'11", 221 pounds. Plays a lot like Le'Veon Bell. Very patient, waits for holes to develop, waits for blocks, doesn't rush anything. But he also has elite burst. When he gets to top speed, he does it very fast. He's very strong. He can run you over. He was carrying guys in his state championship game. There was one touchdown run that he had early where it was basically 1-on-2. It was him versus 2 other defenders, and he ran them both flat the hell over. Now, not only do you have true freshman E.J. Correll, who you should be excited about if you're an Alabama fan at running back, but you also have Daniel Hill, who's entering his 3rd season with the program, and he was the unsung hero of Alabama's season during the second half of 2025. It's often not talked about how Daniel Hill damn near carried Alabama to a comeback win in their first matchup against Oklahoma. He had 2 touchdowns in that game. He's your old school Alabama power back. Not going to make a lot of guys miss in the open field with speed or elusiveness, but he is going to run you over. And what's shocking about Daniel Hill is, despite how big he is, he has very soft hands. You don't normally see a guy his size be as good catching the football, running routes as fluidly as what he has the ability to do. And then you also have to factor in what Keelan Russell, if he wins this job, what he's going to bring to Alabama's ground game. He has a Lamar Jackson kind of skill set to his game. The way he runs the football is kind of like a running back in a sense, despite him playing quarterback. So with the new offensive line coach that Alabama has, along with them bringing in 6 transfers in the transfer portal that have SEC experience, the majority of the guys competing for starting jobs on this offensive line this year mostly are 5-star recruits or better. Alabama isn't hurting for talent at offensive line, nor are they hurting at talent at running back. And more so, it's just the scheme and finding the right offensive line coach, which I believe Adrian Clem is the right hire. And I also believe that Alabama's ground game is going to be vastly improved this season, which means they're going to be able to play more complementary football. It's going to be less of a pass-heavy offense. Even though Kellen DeBoer is a pass-heavy coach at his core, that's what he likes to do. He likes to throw the football, but you still have to be able to run the football when need be. You got to be able to pick up a 3rd and 1, a 4th and 1 without having to get tricky to do so. There were too many instances Alabama was in a 3rd and 1, a 4th and 1, and instead of running the football up the middle, they'll try to do a jet sweep or try to get something on the perimeter to pick up that 1 yard, which tells you everything that you need to know about the state of Alabama's offensive line and how bad their ability to run the football was. This season, I expect for Alabama to have a lot more success on the ground. And Kellen DeBoer is the kind of coach, when he knows something needs to improve, he does everything possible for it to improve. He makes pretty good adjustments. So I'm pretty confident if he was able to figure out how to get Alabama back into the playoffs, back into the SEC championship in only his 2nd season, he's going to figure out how to get this offensive line right and to get that ground game rolling. And just with him having a new quarterback that doesn't have a lot of experience to begin with, whether that be Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, he probably won't trust him as much throwing the football as what he did with a guy like a Jalen Milroe or a Ty Simpson, who just have a little bit more experience underneath their belt. But Alabama fixed their biggest problem this offseason. Their inability to run the football has been fixed with the hiring of offensive line coach Adrian Clem, them bringing in 6 guys on the offensive line out of the transfer portal, several that have SEC experience. They've recruited pretty well on the offensive line as well. And look out for a true freshman running back, 5-star EJ Carell. He's a guy that could immediately have a big impact on this offense. And Daniel Hill could have a breakout season right behind him. Alabama's biggest weakness has finally been fixed this offseason. I'm not trying to be over the top. This isn't hyperbole when I say this, but Ohio State hired the worst offensive coordinator that God ever created. And Ryan Day is one of the best coaches in college football. He deserves the benefit of a doubt. I'm not just going to say this hire is going to spell doom automatically for Ohio State this season, but this definitely is a hire that every Ohio State fan needs to be skeptical of and very critical of. Because even though Ryan Day is an elite coach and elite coaches can overcome making bad hires can limit your ceiling, though. And as long as Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator for Ohio State and he's in charge of the play calling, Ohio State would not come anywhere close to winning another national championship. Arthur Smith is a god-awful offensive coordinator. And this is coming from a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and also somebody that watched a lot of the Atlanta Falcons since I live in the South. Arthur Smith only has 4 plays that he runs. Either a bubble screen, an inside zone run, a crack toss to the outside, or something with Jonnu Smith. Now, I don't know if Jonnu Smith has any eligibility left, but if he does, don't be shocked if you see Jonnu Smith playing for Ohio State next year. Hey, college basketball already has guys that played in the NBA playing in it, so don't be shocked if Arthur Smith some way, somehow finds a way to have Jonnu Smith playing for the Scarlet and Red this year. Because Jonnu Smith, for some strange reason, he just has an obsession with trying to get him the football. He did a better job getting Jonnu Smith his hands on the football than he did getting guys like Kyle Pitts and Drake London the ball. And that's my biggest gripe with Arthur Smith. He doesn't get the ball in the hands of his best playmakers. Jeremiah Smith, we know he's one of the freakiest receivers in the history of college football. I have no questions about Ryan Day being able to get Jeremiah Smith the ball if he continues to call plays. I do have questions if Arthur Smith is going to figure out how to get Jeremiah Smith the ball, since he's not good at getting the ball to his best playmakers. Last year, the Steelers were throwing bubble screens to Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth in the slot. Why are you throwing bubble screens to tight ends out of the slot when you have this bodybuilder at wide receiver named DK Metcalf, who's like 6'4", 235 pounds. He's like a linebacker playing receiver, runs 4'4", 4'5", and that's not who you choose to throw bubble screens to. If there's anybody that you want in the open field with the ball in their hands, it's DK Metcalf. So I didn't understand why Arthur Smith was prioritizing getting the ball to Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, Darnell Washington over DK Metcalf. Ohio State fans, you better pray that Ryan Day is calling the plays and he's not stupid enough to give the play calling up to Arthur Smith. I give Ryan Day the benefit of a doubt. He knows what he's doing. He knows more about football than me and a lot of you all that talk about this. But this is one of those hires that you just feel Ryan Day has a little bit too much confidence in his head coach rehabilitation center that he now is starting to make Ohio State. Because look, Matt Patricia worked out wonderfully as Ohio State's defensive coordinator. He was a guy similar to Arthur Smith, was a head coach. It didn't work out. Then he had some rough stints as a DC when he was outside of New England. But Matt Patricia has more prestige than what Arthur Smith has as a coordinator. Matt Patricia was the architect of several Super Bowl winning defenses on the staff of the greatest head coach in NFL history. Arthur Smith wasn't winning Super Bowls when he was calling plays for Mike Vrabel and he led them to the AFC Championship. All he did was just spam the football to Derrick Henry 30, 40 times. He had A.J. Brown and Ryan Tannehill who connected on a few big plays occasionally, but that's really Arthur Smith's best work. There was nothing really innovative or cutting edge about his offense. I guess the only thing that makes Arthur Smith's offense a little bit different from others is that you wouldn't expect for most people to call the kind of plays that Arthur Smith does in certain situations. For example, in 3rd and short, Arthur Smith loves to throw Hail Marys. He doesn't care about you being a yard or two away from the first down marker on 3rd down. He'd rather just throw a Hail Mary and try to get it all in one play. He also doesn't like to run the football up the middle when you should be running the football up the middle. For some reason, he just loves trying to fool teams in short yardage situations, thinking they finna run the football up the gut. No. If Arthur Smith calling plays, we finna toss that thing to the outside, toss crack to the right. Let's get it. Arthur Smith is an awful offensive coordinator. And I'm not saying this because I hate Ohio State. I don't have anything against Ohio State. I like Ohio State because you guys watch these videos, and when you watch the videos and they do well, you get me paid. So I don't hate Ohio State. I do hate Ohio State's decision to hire Arthur Smith as their next offensive coordinator. And as long as he's in charge of calling the plays for Ohio State's offense, you can kiss any shot Ohio State has at winning a national championship under Ryan Day again. Goodbye, because you're not going to come close to sniffing one as long as you have Arthur Smith, the worst offensive coordinator that God has ever put on this green earth, calling plays for you, man. Arthur Smith was a disastrous hire. I cannot believe that Ryan Day literally went through all these different OCs and said, yeah, Arthur Smith is the right guy for the job. Now, like I said, Ryan Day is trying to be what Nick Saban was during his heyday at Alabama, a rehabilitation center for failed head coaches. Nick Saban did this better than anybody. He would take a head coach that got fired, one that flamed out, rehabilitate them, make them a coordinator, then all of a sudden, they end up being good enough to be head coaches again, and they actually turn out to be pretty solid. The thing with Ryan Day is we haven't seen him do what Nick Saban did, rehabilitating failed head coaches, for as long as what Nick Saban did. Really, this is his second season rehabilitating flamed out head coaches. Last year was year one when he tried it out with Matt Patricia, but Matt Patricia was going to succeed. Matt Patricia, if you just listen to this guy talk football, he's a football historian. Matt Patricia can tell you everything about the game of football from when it first started to how the game has evolved to now. Arthur Smith doesn't have that same resume as what Matt Patricia does. And that's why I'm not as confident the hiring of Arthur Smith as Ohio State's new OC is going to work out, as well as the hiring of Matt Patricia as their defensive coordinator worked out last season. Who's the Heisman winner that you first think of when you think of the Heisman Trophy? To me, it's Johnny Manziel, Tim Tebow, Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson. But there's a Heisman winner that oftentimes seems to be forgotten, is never brought up, how dominant his Heisman campaign was, despite being one of the few non-quarterbacks to win the award. Devontae Smith is the Heisman Trophy winner that college football has seemed to forgot about, despite winning the award only 6 years ago. But him winning the award in 2020 is actually the main reason why it's forgotten that he even won it to begin with, since the year 2020, we already know, was hella weird with COVID happening. We didn't even know if we were even going to have a college football season that year. And then with how the year ended, Alabama won it all. People want to put an at-risk next to it since it just was a weird year, which is understandable. But even if you want to put an at-risk next to Alabama's national title win in 2020 and Devontae Smith's Heisman Trophy campaign, Devontae Smith was one of the most dominant Heisman Trophy winners in modern history. This guy, in his final game at Alabama, in the national championship against Clemson, had 215 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns and only played one half of football. He couldn't go in the second half because he got injured. But if he did, the brother could have went for 500 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns with how great he was looking in that game. DeVonta Smith, what made his Heisman campaign in 2020 so special is that at the time, he was the unanimous best player in college football, where people were very reluctant to claim a non-quarterback was the number one player in the sport. And this was pre-Travis Hunter, pre-Jeremiah Smith. Ever since these guys have entered college football, more people have opened up to the idea of a non-quarterback winning the Heisman, a non-quarterback being the best player in college football. But at this time, though, there was a period when either a quarterback or a running back were winning the Heisman Trophy. And the only wide receiver that came close to winning the Heisman Trophy before DeVonta Smith was Michael Crabtree, when he had that prolific season 16 years ago at Texas Tech under Mike Leach. R.I.P., God rest his soul. DeVonta Smith is the second non-quarterback outside of Desmond Howard to win the award at the time that he won it. Travis Hunter since has won it. Ashton Jeanty came close to winning that thing as well. But DeVonta Smith won the Heisman Trophy at a point in time in college football when it seemed damn near impossible for a non-quarterback to win it. DeVonta Smith was a one-man offense on a team that had 2 other Heisman finalists along with them. Mac Jones and Najee Harris also finished top 5 in Heisman voting that year. You also had a DeVonta Smith dominating, putting up Heisman numbers, sharing the same field with Jalen Waddle, who was a top 10 pick and got drafted before DeVonta Smith did, despite DeVonta Smith being the better of the 2 receivers. And also, you couldn't say very often that a non-quarterback was the best player on an Alabama offense. Like, DeVonta Smith was that good. He was a one-man wrecking crew. Steve Sarkisian, who was the offensive coordinator at this time for Alabama, was just spamming DeVonta Smith the ball any way possible, whether it be bubble screens, using bubble screens as an extension on the run game, short passes, intermediate passes, deep bombs when DeVonta Smith is breaking ankles, blowing past guys, forcing guys to mess up on their assignments. DeVonta Smith's Heisman campaign was truly special, and it's quickly been forgotten because when you bring up some of the best Heisman Trophy winners, or just Heisman Trophy winners in general, if I were to ask you to name 5 Heisman Trophy winners off the top of your head, you're not even going to think of DeVonta Smith first. Most people kind of don't even remember DeVonta Smith won a Heisman Trophy to begin with, because he was one of the few non-quarterbacks to take home the award. But when I was laying in my bed last night and I was on YouTube, I came across some DeVonta Smith highlights from 2020. And it reminded me just how truly special DeVonta Smith's Heisman campaign was. DeVonta Smith, not only is he one of the best non-quarterbacks to win the Heisman Trophy, but DeVonta Smith is quietly one of the best players in the history of Alabama football. He caught the game-winning touchdown in the national championship against Georgia as a true freshman from Tua, which was really ironic. And then a few years later, he goes on to not just win another national championship, but win the Heisman Trophy and the most dominant season that we've ever seen from a wide receiver. DeVonta Smith led the nation during his Heisman campaign in receptions and receiving yards. There wasn't a single corner that could cover DeVonta Smith. DeVonta Smith was a true unicorn. He was a one-of-one. This was somebody that wasn't built like a Julio Jones or a Jeremiah Smith. This was somebody that was like 6 feet, 150 pounds soaking wet when he was fresh out of high school and still found the way to get on the field. One thing about Nick Saban, he didn't mess around when it came to hitting that weight room. If you didn't have the size to play, you were not going to get put on the field. So the fact that DeVonta Smith, despite being outside of the norm for what Nick Saban was looking for from positional standards out of his receiver, from a size and production standpoint, he still found the way to get on the field and make plays. When you're a great player, regardless of your size, regardless of your skill set, if you just know how to make plays, you can't be denied. And that's all Devontae Smith did during his time down in Tuscaloosa. And remind you, for a guy that played with a bunch of first-round picks, a lot of first-round caliber receivers, for him to be the best of the bunch and to win the Heisman Trophy is a testimony to how truly dominant his Heisman campaign was. And it often gets not talked about how good this season was and how great of a Heisman campaign he put together. He beat out the golden boy Trevor Lawrence by 400 first-place votes. So not only was he the undisputed best player in America, but there wasn't no ifs, ands, or buts about if he deserved to win a Heisman or not. Like when Travis Hunter won a Heisman Trophy over Ashton Jeanty, it was very polarizing. There was a lot of back and forth about it. There wasn't no back and forth when it came to Devontae Smith, and that's what made Devontae Smith winning the Heisman Trophy so beautiful, because all of us agreed, despite the Heisman being what most would consider a quarterback-heavy award, giving it to Devontae Smith was something that we all knew should have happened, but we questioned if it actually would happen, since you don't often see a non-quarterback, especially a wide receiver, win the award. And for Devontae Smith to be the first receiver in over 2-3 decades to win it at the time, it was just unprecedented. You just never thought it was going to happen. So when it comes to all of the Heisman Trophy winners in the history of college football that have taken home the award, Devontae Smith, to me, is the most forgotten Heisman winner out of all of them, because he had one of the most dominant non-quarterback Heisman winning seasons ever. And it happened 6 years ago, and nobody ever talks about it like that. Nobody ever brings up how good Devontae Smith's Heisman campaign was 6 years ago. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to Dixon Maya. Shout out to Lisa Fitz, us three. Shout out to everybody that's tapped in. We got a few more things to talk about before we get up on out of here, man. But real quick, just give me like 10 seconds. I got to text somebody real quick. All right, so you know they always say in football, speed kills. Well, for Tennessee, speed has killed any chance they have in the foreseeable future of ever winning a national championship as long as Josh Heupel is the head coach. Tennessee has the fastest offense in college football. It only takes them 12 to 13 seconds to snap the ball, which puts the opposing defense at a disadvantage since you're on the field for a lot of plays that Tennessee runs very fast. You can't substitute guys in and out, so guys get fatigued a lot more quicker than what they did if you were playing against anybody else. And from a schematic and tactical standpoint, Tennessee's offense takes advantage of all the rules of college football, from the way the field is designed with the far hashes, you being able to line up receivers bunched up damn near the sidelines. It's a very difficult offense to defend against if you don't have the right personnel to defend against it, and you don't have a defensive coordinator that knows how to game plan for it. The issue with Tennessee's offense is, even though it hurts the opposing defense that you're going up against, it also hurts your defense as well due to the same factors. You are asking your defense to play a significant amount of more plays compared to the opposing defense. And your defense doesn't get a lot of rest. They don't get a lot of time to recuperate on the sidelines. And also, you need elite depth at every position if you're Tennessee, from defensive line, linebacker, corner, safety, in order to have an elite defense while having this style of play on offense. If you're going to have the fastest offense in college football and you're going to put your defense at a disadvantage being on the field for 20 to maybe 30 plus more plays than your opposition, you got to have elite depth at all three levels, all three positions to keep guys fresh. And in this new age of college football with NIL and the transfer portal, it's hard to have that kind of elite depth that you had a few years ago when you made it to the playoffs and you got pounced in the first round by Ohio State. And then football is also a battle of attrition, especially late during the season when you're playing the gauntlet that is the SEC schedule, and then you get into the playoffs, which now has been extended by 2-3 extra games. You wear down your defense when you have this fast-paced offense and guys get a lot more wear and tear on them quicker since they're on the field for a lot more snaps than normal if you were running a traditional offense, which allows it to be a lot easier for physical football teams like 2024 Ohio State to wear you down and just run the football all over you because your defense gets tired out, they get fatigued very quickly. And since you don't have the ability to play complementary football to keep those guys on the sidelines rested for enough time where they can at least get a sip of Gatorade, you are never going to have an elite defense, even if you have Jim Knowles. And Jim Knowles is one of the best defensive coordinators in the sport, but there's only so much he can do to that side of the ball when you're putting his defense at a disadvantage just with the style of offense that you like to run. Hell, I didn't think that the previous defensive coordinator that you had was that bad. Didn't the guy have like a top 20 defense 2 years ago with guys like James Pierce Jr.? So if your defense was that good in spite of how quick your offense is playing all those snaps, then was defensive coordinator really the problem for Tennessee, or is their offense the problem for why they can never have a good defense? Because when you're on the field for as many plays as what Tennessee's defense is on the field for, and you're getting out-snapped, and you're losing time possession, then yeah, it's going to be hard to see you winning a national championship when you don't have the ability to put a national championship level defense on the field unless you just find a way to have elite depth. And that's nearly impossible to do when you just have guys going in and out of the transfer portal every year. Guys want to start. They don't want to be just rotational guys unless you're just throwing a lot of money at those guys to keep them around, which Tennessee has the ability to do. They were top 10 and the most expensive rosters in college football last year, so they got the money, but it's just unrealistic to have such a fast-paced offense and expect a top 10 or better defense out of that unit when your offense is hurting them. They're putting them at a disadvantage. And not only is Tennessee's offense bad for their defense, but their offense hurts anybody that's playing on that side of the ball's ability to have success in the NFL. Tennessee, during their time under Josh Heupel as head coach, has put 17 players into the NFL. And the majority of those guys on offense have an daily squad in the league. Jalen Hyatt won the Biletnikoff Award. He went for a $1,200 against Nick Saban in Alabama years ago. He's done nothing in the NFL. Jalen Wright had a very good career at Tennessee. He hasn't done anything in the league. Dylan Sampson, one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in Tennessee history, hasn't done that much in the league. Hendon Hooker, who had the most efficient season ever for a Tennessee quarterback a few years ago, he's been nothing but a backup third-string guy in the NFL. The most productive player that Tennessee has put into the NFL with Josh Heupel's offense is Darnell Wright, who currently starts at right tackle for the Chicago Bears. That's about it. Tennessee's offense just doesn't set players up for success at the next level, which also could hurt Tennessee in recruiting. When you're recruiting against Alabama and Georgia, and the amount that you're trying to pay those guys is the same, all Alabama or Kirby Smart have to say is, look, have you seen that offense? Why would you want to play for an offense that hasn't produced a single productive player in the NFL yet? Tennessee's offense is the worst in college football. Not because it doesn't put up great numbers. That's the whole purpose of the offense, to take advantage of the college field and the college rules. It's a college-based offense that produces well for the college game, but it doesn't produce well when it comes to the NFL, since it doesn't translate well, because the NFL, they don't have as wide as margins as what they do in college football. They don't have the same amount of guys on defense as what you do in college football. In the NFL, you got guys that have better stamina, that are better conditioned. Tennessee's offense hurts their defense, and it hurts anybody playing in its chances of having success in the NFL. This is not a good offense, and it damn sure ain't a national championship winning offense either. This is all I got for this episode of JT Sports Live. I appreciate you guys for tapping into this episode. I will see you guys tomorrow, same time, 9:25 p.m. Eastern time, with another